In a quiet, tree-lined neighborhood on the east side of Columbus, Ohio, there lived an English bulldog named Duke. He was 4 years old, 26 pounds of pure stubbornness, and absolutely convinced that the Mitchell family's beige couch belonged to him alone. Duke had a routine, and he kept it with military precision. Every morning at 6:15 a.m., he would waddle into Tom and Sarah Mitchell's bedroom, place his wide, wrinkled chin on the edge of the mattress, and stare at them with his enormous brown eyes until one of them got up to fill his bowl. He didn't bark, he didn't whine, he just stared, and somehow that was worse. He loved 3 things above everything else: the couch, the afternoon sun that fell through the living room window at exactly 2 p.m., and a worn tennis ball he'd had since he was 8 weeks old. He carried it everywhere. Sometimes he'd just sit in the middle of the room, holding it in his mouth, not doing anything at all, looking deeply satisfied with himself. Tom always joked that Duke had the emotional range of a king, generous when comfortable, deeply offended when disturbed. Sarah laughed every time, but she knew the truth. Beneath all that wrinkle and snore and dramatic sighing, Duke was the most loyal creature she had ever known. For 4 years, life was simple. Duke was the baby, Duke was the center, and Duke, for his part, saw no reason why anything should ever change. It started small. One afternoon in late October, Sarah came home with a large paper bag full of tiny folded clothes, soft yellows and pale greens, impossibly small socks, and something that looked like a very miniature hat. Duke sniffed the bag thoroughly, sneezed twice, and went back to his spot on the couch. Then a white wooden crib appeared in the spare bedroom. Duke inspected it with great suspicion. He walked around it 3 times, sniffed every leg, and then sat down in front of it and looked at Tom as if to say, "What is this? And more importantly, is it a threat to my couch?" The house smelled different too. Baby lotion, new fabric, something unfamiliar. Duke's nose worked overtime. He followed Sarah from room to room more than usual, not frantically, but quietly, the way dogs do when they sense something enormous is coming and they haven't quite decided how they feel about it yet. Tom and Sarah had talked to their vet about introducing a new baby to Duke. "He's a bulldog," the vet had said, smiling. "They're stubborn and they can be territorial. Just go slow. Let him set the pace." They'd read articles, watched videos, done everything right. And still, that last week of February, as Sarah's hospital bag sat by the front door, Tom looked at Duke and felt a small knot of worry in his stomach. Duke looked back, then yawned magnificently and looked away. It was a Tuesday. Cold, bright Ohio morning, the kind where the sky is pale blue and the bare trees make long shadows on the sidewalk. Tom pulled into the driveway at 11 a.m. Sarah sat in the passenger seat, Emma bundled in her arms, 6 pounds, 4 ounces, 8 days old, wearing a white onesie with a small duck on the chest. Duke heard the car. He was at the window before they even opened the door, his broad, flat face pressed against the glass, his breath fogging it up. Tom came in first and gave Duke his usual greeting, a scratch behind the ear, a calm, "Hey, buddy." Duke barely noticed. His eyes were fixed on the blanket in Sarah's arms. Sarah came in slowly and sat on the couch, Duke's couch. She held Emma carefully and looked at Duke. "Come here, bud. Come say hi." Duke walked over. He didn't rush. He approached the way he approached everything unfamiliar, slowly, deliberately, with great dignity. He stretched his neck forward and sniffed once, then twice, then pulled back, sat down on the rug right in front of Sarah, looked up at her face, then back down at Emma, and let out one long, slow exhale through his nose, the kind that means, "Okay, I understand now. This is mine to protect." Sarah cried. She hadn't expected to, but she did. He didn't bark, he didn't growl, he didn't even sniff her for too long. He just looked at her, and I swear something shifted in his eyes, like he'd been waiting. The first night was hard. Emma was up 3 times, and Tom and Sarah stumbled back and forth in the dark, exhausted and slightly delirious. What they noticed, only later looking back, was that every single time Emma cried, Duke was already awake. By the end of the first week, a new routine had formed without anyone planning it. Duke slept on his bed, but he'd moved his bed. On his own, inch by inch over 2 days, he had nudged it from his usual spot near the couch to the doorway of Emma's room. He didn't sleep inside the room, just in the doorway, like a sentry at a gate. The 9th night home at 2:37 a.m., Emma started to cry. Tom and Sarah were deep asleep. Before the baby monitor even crackled to life, Duke was in their doorway, pawing gently on the wooden floor, tap, 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 until Tom opened his eyes. By the time Tom reached Emma's room, Duke was already at his post. Tom told this story to their pediatrician at the 6-week checkup. The doctor smiled and said she wasn't surprised. "Bulldogs are pack animals," she said. "When they accept a new family member, they really accept them. They're basically adopted her." Tom nodded. That felt exactly right. Emma was 8 months old when it happened. She was lying on her back on a playmat in the living room, kicking her legs and batting at a hanging plastic butterfly. Duke was lying nearby in his sunspot, chin on the floor, watching her the way he always did, patient, steady, unbothered. Emma rolled onto her stomach, pushed herself up on her arms, and found herself suddenly face to face with Duke. About 6 inches separated them. Emma stared at his massive, wrinkled, flat-nosed face. Duke stared back, completely still. And then Emma laughed. Not a small sound, not a polite little giggle, a real laugh, full and bright and sudden, the kind that fills a room. She grabbed Duke's face with both chubby hands and squeezed his cheeks together and laughed harder. Duke sat absolutely motionless. He let her pull and poke and squish his wrinkles as though he had been training for exactly this moment his entire life. Sarah had her phone out. She always did near Duke and Emma now, and she caught the whole thing. She posted the video that evening with the caption, "He's been waiting for her his whole life." By the next morning, it had 200,000 views. By the end of the week, 2.1 million. The comments were full of people saying it was the best thing they'd seen all year. Sarah wasn't surprised. She'd known since March 7th. Emma's first walking attempt happened on a Saturday in January, just after she turned 1. She pulled herself up on the coffee table, let go, took 2 enormous wobbling steps, and sat down hard on the carpet. She looked up at her parents with a face that couldn't decide between laughing and crying. Duke was across the room. He stood up, walked over, and sniffed her head. Emma grabbed his ear for balance, hauled herself upright again, took 3 more steps, and fell against his side. Duke didn't move. He stood there like a wall, solid and warm, and Emma's face broke into a grin. Over the next few weeks, Emma's strategy for learning to walk involved Duke in almost every attempt. She would pull herself up on whatever was nearby, the couch, the table, Duke, and set off across the room. Duke learned to move slowly when she was holding on. He seemed to understand, somehow, that his job was to be steady. By February, she was walking on her own, wobbling and triumphant, with Duke trailing behind her at 3 paces like a really low-to-the-ground bodyguard. Emma's first word was mama. Her second was dad. Her third, to absolutely no one's surprise, was doo-doo. This was her word for Duke, arrived at after many serious attempts at Duke that all came out wrong in interesting ways. Duke accepted the name immediately and completely. He responded to it as readily as he responded to his real name, which is to say, he responded when he felt like it and otherwise ignored it, which is very on brand for a bulldog. Emma's first full sentence, captured on video on a Wednesday evening when she was 2.5, was directed at Duke, who had stopped following her to the back door for some private reason of his own. Emma stood in the kitchen, pointed at him, and said with tremendous seriousness, "Doo-doo, come here, now." Duke came. He always did, in the end, for Emma. For Tom and Sarah, maybe 1 time in 3. For Emma, always. Sarah started keeping a notebook of the things Emma said to Duke, not because she planned to publish it or share it, just because she wanted to remember. Things like, "Doo-doo, you smell." True. "Doo-doo, sit with me." "Doo-doo, I love your face." Duke endured that one with great patience. The notebook filled up faster than she expected. In the spring of 2022, Duke got sick. He'd been slower for a couple of weeks, slower than usual even for Duke, and one morning he didn't finish his breakfast, which had never happened in his life. Tom took him to the vet that afternoon. The diagnosis was a heart condition, not uncommon in older English bulldogs, manageable with medication, but something they'd need to watch carefully. They didn't tell Emma the details, she was 3, but children know things. That evening, she climbed down from the dinner table, walked over to where Duke was lying on his bed, and lay down next to him, right there on the floor, and put her arm around him. She didn't say anything, she just stayed there. Tom took a photo. He didn't post it anywhere. Some things are just for you. Duke responded well to the medication. He was never quite as energetic as before, though energetic had always been a relative term for Duke. But by summer, he was back to his routine: the couch, the sunspot, the tennis ball, and Emma. She climbed down from dinner and just lay on the floor next to him. 3 years old. She didn't know what was wrong, but she knew he needed her there. September 2023. Emma was 4.5, wearing a backpack almost as big as she was, standing at the front door on her first day of preschool. She looked excited. She also looked like she was trying very hard to not look scared, which Tom and Sarah recognized because they were doing the same thing. Duke sat in the hallway watching. When Sarah walked Emma to the car, Duke went to the window, the same window where he'd waited the day Emma came home, and watched the car back out of the driveway. Then he walked to Emma's room and lay down in front of her small bookshelf. He stayed there most of the morning. When the car pulled back into the driveway at noon, Duke was at the window before Sarah even cut the engine. Emma burst through the front door yelling, "Doo-doo!" and Duke, who had not moved faster than a slow trot in 2 years, met her halfway across the hallway. That became the new routine. Every school day, Duke at the window watching her leave, Duke at the window watching her come back, Emma through the door calling his name, the greeting every single time like she'd been gone for a month. Duke turned 7 in the fall of 2023. His muzzle has gone a little gray, and he sleeps more than he used to, and his heart medication now comes in a little pill pocket that Emma insists on giving him herself every morning. "Medicine time, Doo-doo," she says very seriously, and Duke eats it from her hand every single time without argument, which is remarkable because Duke will argue with everyone else about everything. Emma is 5 now. She tells people at school that her best friend is a dog. When her teacher asked her to draw her family, she drew Tom, Sarah, herself, and Duke, all the same size, all holding hands, Duke with what appeared to be a tennis ball in his paw. Sarah still has the notebook.